Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming along today in such large numbers. We're very happy to see such a turnout for what promises to be a very interesting talk. The speaker beside me here is, of course, Governor Takeshi Onaga. And the issue we're mainly going to talk about is, of course, the Henoko Futenma base issue. Just to refresh, in 1996, the US military picked Henoko Beach as their preferred relocation site for the US Futenma air base in Okinawa. That choice, as we all know, has proved bitterly controversial. While everyone accepts that Futenma must move out of the center of crowded Jinwan city, most Okinawans want the mainland to share more of the burden of Japan's military alliance with America. Local opinion polls put opposition to building off Henoko at 80%. Last November, Governor Onaga was decisively elected, landslide election, essentially on a single issue, opposing construction of the new base on one of Okinawa's most pristine, few last pristine natural coastlines. He said at the time, and some of us were down there covering the election, and this is a quote, "I've made it my goal to not allow the construction of the new base." That was a very clear statement of intent. He's a former LDP conservative politician and now independent, despite the fact that he hails from the same party as Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, which now rules, of course. He is a strong believer in Okinawa's unique identity and history, and he's proven willing to go toe-to-toe with the central government in steadfastly refusing to authorize construction of the new base. The question that all of us here, I suppose, will want to know is how far will he go in that campaign? Prime Minister Abe finally met Governor Onaga last month after what many of us thought was shunning him for several months. Abe told Onaga-san that Henoko is the only solution. Onaga-san is now off to the US at the end of this month to put his case to America. He is going to talk for about 15 minutes, he says. We will have simultaneous translation. Can I ask you, please, if you haven't already, switch off your mobile phones and give him your best attention. Thank you very much. Onaga-san.
はい。これはもうお出ししますので。
Hello. These are Okinawa ways of saying hello. Thank you so very much for allowing me to have the opportunity to speak in front of you today at the FCCJ. Thank you so much for coming in such large numbers to come hear me and to hear about the problems that we have in Okinawa regarding the U.S. Military bases, also our thoughts about the U.S.-Japan Security Pact. We hope very much through this press conference and through the question and answer session that follows that you will be able to further deepen your understanding of the issues that face, the challenges that face the people of Okinawa. In other words, we would hope for a more deepened debate between Okinawa and the peoples of the world. I am a little nervous because there's so many people here, so I don't know if I'll be able to give a good speech, but I will try my best, and I'll speak for about 15 minutes and then respond to your questions later. First of all, I'd like to speak very briefly about the history of Okinawa. Okinawa, about 500 years, it spent as part of the kingdom of the Ryukyu Islands. At that time, we had basically this idea of being the bridge between Japan and the rest of Asia. It was a center of trade between China and Japan and much of this area of the Pacific Ocean. We have several centuries old history of this kind of naval marine trade. If you go to the different museums throughout the world, we see that people from the Ryukyu kingdom visited foreign countries 600 years ago. If you go to Beijing, you can see that there are graves, actually, of people, cemeteries of people who came from the Ryukyu kingdom at that time. And there was also, in a place near Beijing, a house in which Ryukyu people had lived. And also in Beijing, there were people who were from the Ryukyu Islands, who basically were the elite of the kingdom at that time, and they were there in China to observe the elite of China study and pursue their academic careers. Also in Okinawa, we have awamori, which is basically a kind of rice that originally came from Thailand. So you can see that we have a several centuries old history with Thailand as well. So given this tremendous background, in the 1800s, we see that Commodore Perry comes to the coast of Japan. He first came to Uraga port in 1853. So everyone knows this in their history books that Mr. Perry originally came to Uraga port in 1853. But actually, the truth is that before that, about 5 times he visited Okinawa before and around that time. He spent about 85 days in total during this period, during these 5 visits. And in 1854, we also had a treaty of amity and trade between the United States and the Ryukyu Kingdom, also with France as well. And 25 years after that, since 1879, we became part of a larger territory. So in Okinawa, we have had this very long history, and as we became part of the greater Japanese territory, we were told that we were not allowed to use the Okinawa language. We were basically taught to become proud Japanese citizens, and this kind of national education became prevalent. And so since that time, we've worked very, very hard to try to work for the benefit of Japan. And of course, another great milestone in our history was the World War II. And as you know, during World War II, we lost over 100,000 people to war. This is the only part of Japanese territory in which so many people died actually during a battle, and it's many, many civilians as well. It was a tragic point in history for us. If I talk about the war, I will run out of time at this press conference today. So what I want to say is that before the war, during the war, and after the war, Okinawa has served to basically serve Japan and to contribute tremendously to Japan. And as a result of the San Francisco Peace Treaty in 1952, Japan regained its sovereignty. However, Okinawa was cut off from the rest of Japan. And under a very, very severe period of time where it was under the administrative rule of the United States, 27 years, there was basically extraterritoriality. There was a high commissioner for Okinawa. We really did not have the regular constitutional legislatures that other countries had. We did have a legislature, but we were under the authority of the High Commissioner. So 27 years ago, we never were allowed to produce a diet member to go to the Japanese diet. So for that time, we were not American citizens, and we were not Japanese citizens either. And when there was a ship that was caught off the coast of Indonesia, we set up our flag, the Okinawa flag, but no one recognized it. And of course, during the Vietnam War, we were also very much the central focus point for many fighter bombers to take off to fight in the war, U.S. forces to fight in the war. So in spite of the fact that we were there to basically support Japan for this 27-year period, Japan, the mainland, were able to enjoy a very high growth rate period. However, but in regard to this, our own economic development was very much delayed. In spite of this background, we are told now that Okinawa has a great burden and responsibility to bear the security of Japan, and we must therefore ensure that Futenma Air Force Base must somehow be relocated to another part of Okinawa. But I would like to also mention that the Futenma Air Force Base was something that we did not voluntarily offer that land to the U.S. forces to use as a base. It was appropriated from us during the end of the war. There was never a time when we have ever voluntarily offered base land to the Okinawa. There were times during the end of the war and after the end of the war where we were put into camps, concentration camps, and we were put out of our homes. And that's when the bases were quite in large part built. So 27 years, even today, we still have the legacy of this very, very tragic past. So what I would like to say is that, again, here, these are people who have taken away our land forcibly and have forced the people of Okinawa to bear great burdens and sacrifices. And now, suddenly, to be told by the Japanese government that, and by the authorities that the Air Force base is now quite old and it must be replaced, you've got to take care of it somehow. If you can't rebuild on Futenma base itself, then you have to provide an alternative territory. To that, I must respond that, yes, of course, I value the U.S.-Japan Security Pact. I believe, however, that if you think about this very carefully, then I think this is an abandonment of one's responsibilities for the Japanese government to take such an attitude. If we look at the current situation, if we look at the fact that the Air Force base, the bases that exist in Okinawa basically were forcibly created, land taken away from us by bulldozers and by the point of a gun, by the point of a rifle. Why then can you say that we share the same values, Japan and the United States, when the people of Okinawa have borne such a tremendous tragic legacy? I very much respect the Japan-U.S. Security Pact. I just think that, however, it must be something that is going to be something that is much more respected, something that is much more beautiful, something that is more fair and equitable. Otherwise, we cannot become a leader. Japan cannot become a leader of Asia. Mr. Abe went to the United States, had meetings with the president there, and I went to visit Mr. Abe in Tokyo, and it was said that the Japanese government is going to move some of the Ospreys from Okinawa to other places, and all of the bases south of Fort Kadena, Kadena Base, will be removed. But I responded that you say wonderful things, and on the surface it sounds wonderful. However, but by Futenma moving to Henoko and having all of the bases south of Kadena being moved, do you know how much of an actual reduction this will be in terms of bases territory? I mentioned this to Mr. Okudera, Minister of Defense, last year as well. Even if these two things are realized, even if these 2 points are realized, 73.8% is the amount of bases that we hold of U.S. military bases in Japan, and that 73.8% will be reduced only to 73.1%. In other words, it's only a 0.7% reduction in the bases in Japan.
So I cannot say the detailed and undecided plans, but it's all relocated within the prefecture, so it's only a reduction of 0.7%. As Prime Minister says, there is a time limit. For example, the Naha port by 2025, and the Camp Kinza 2028. That is a time limit for returning to Okinawa. Then, if you take a look at it, the Japanese people may say that he's doing his job and they are making progress about it. However, but after that time limit, what does it say? Or thereafter, 2028 or thereafter. That means that since the last for the last 70 years, we never knew when the lands will be returned to us, so we cannot really trust this kind of promises. So the Prime Minister says that that they are making progress in the returning of the bases, but I cannot say this is true. With regard to Osprey, the Ospreys are now scattered around the mainland for training, but 2012, 6 months before the deployment, there was already rumor of deployment in Okinawa. So then I asked the then Defense Minister Morimoto whether the Ospreys will be deployed in Okinawa, and he said that he doesn't know. But then that Mr. Morimoto, who was the defense minister, but then he wrote in 2010, about 5 years ago, he wrote a book, and in the book he said that in 2012, 12 Ospreys, and 2013, 12 Ospreys will be deployed. The defense minister said they didn't know, but the one scholar already wrote that the 12 Ospreys will be deployed in 2012 and 2013, and his prediction was right. So that means that whether the defense Ministry of Japan is incapable, or that they are ignoring Japanese people, neglecting Japanese people. And Mr. Morimoto wrote in his book that since the new base in Henoko was designed in order to accommodate Ospreys, and that is why the Ospreys will be deployed in Okinawa. So 22 Ospreys are now deployed in Okinawa, and some are deployed in the mainland Japan. However, they will be returned to Okinawa ultimately. So I told the Prime Minister that I cannot trust your word because of this kind of background. Lastly, 13 years ago, Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense at that time, said that the Futenma was the most dangerous base, and so he came to visit to see it, and Mr. Rumsfeld said that this should be relocated because this is very dangerous. And the Chief Cabinet Secretary Suga has been repeatedly saying that because Futenma is the most dangerous base in the world, so it should be relocated as soon as possible. So if they cannot build a new base in Henoko, then this Futenma base will be permanently fixated on that island, on that place. And if the new base cannot be built, then I'd like to know whether the Futenma base permanently stays there, because they are threatening the Futenma base will remain there forever. So, and Mr. Suga has repeatedly saying that this is the most dangerous base, and if they cannot build a new base in Henoko, so I'm asking whether the Futenma will remain there, but I haven't got an answer from them.
Thank you very much for the speech and for being a picture of brevity. Sometimes we get people here speaking for 45 minutes. We really appreciate the fact that you've made your speech short and have left plenty of time for questions. So we'll take questions first of all from the working press. Can I please ask you, when you come to the mic, to state your name and your organization. Please don't make any speeches. Keep your questions short if you can. If we hear speeches, we'll have to cut you off. Thanks very much. I see this chap here.
Siegfried Nittel from Germany, writing for Austrian newspaper. You mentioned that Okinawa was a main victim in the Second World War. But now, if I read what's written about what the protest of the Okinawan people, I think, and if Okinawa is still the main area of American troops in Japan, I think 70% of the American troops are in Okinawa. It means in a conflict, Okinawa would again a main target of the enemy. But I think there is no political discussion about it, that Okinawa would be the main victim again. Could you tell us why this is not a discussion, why this is not a protest against this point?
The new base in Henoko, when the Henoko was picked up, Mr. Joseph Nye and Mr. Mochizuki in the United States said that the Marines should not be relocated there because now the Chinese have more developed missiles, and because it's too close to China, so a few missiles may hit the Cadena or Futema, then that may threaten the lives of not only the Okinawa, but the military personnel of the U.S. forces. So we should be withdrawn to Guam or Hawaii and then reconsider about the deterrence. So this was an idea which was there in the United States a couple of years ago, but unfortunately the former governor of Okinawa approved the reclamation of the Henoko. So, but the United States is now inclining towards that kind of thinking. 70 years ago, 100,000 Okinawans died, and because of the San Francisco Peace Treaty, Japan got independent by separating Okinawa, which served Japan with such a price. And we were a stateless people for many years. So once a conflict occurs, Okinawa may be again separated from Japan, or again many people will die, and this kind of fear the Okinawan people have, and that's natural. So the Japan has been considering only from the perspective of the defense of Japan. So the voices of Okinawan, although it's very forceful and strong in Okinawa, but the major mainstream media in the mainland have been ignoring. So we have no measure left to us to appeal this kind of question. So I feel really regrettable. I met with the Prime Minister Abe and Mr. Suga and Mr. Nakatani, Defense Minister, and after that, according to the polls taken by the nationwide newspapers, a majority of the mainland people are against this Henoko relocation. So finally, I feel very encouraged that the Japanese people are now beginning to understand what we are talking about. So that is why I appreciate this occasion at the FCCJ today.
Süddeutsche Zeitung, Germany. You just mentioned the former governor Nakayama. He campaigned in 2010 against Henoko, and I think you were his campaign manager. And then he changed his mind. So obviously he was put under pressure. Can you tell us, you know him well, so can you tell us what kind of pressure was put on him to change his mind?
Well, 4 years ago, in 2010, I was actually the head of his election campaign, and I was working with him very closely to try to work against the Henoko reclamation. And I believe that most of the people were very much feeling the same way, but he changed his mind. But I was hoping that he might at least consult with me, but there was no consultation. He went ahead, and so I don't know what happened. I don't know what kind of pressures he was under. I don't know what the process was.
My name is Jimbo from Video News. And at the Japan Press Club, you told the press when asked about what to do with Okinawa, because this is a question of Japan, so Japanese people should consider about it. I know that, but still, I'd like to ask this question. The Japanese government has this policy and doesn't change this policy of relocating to Henoko, and if so, what kind of alternatives and choices do you think you have as Okinawa? Ultimately, it may lead to the argument of the independence of Okinawa, and are you ready for that? Or the mainland people, there are many people who want to do something about this situation in Okinawa. So in such a situation, what is possible by people in the mainland, or what do you expect the mainland people to do? This is a question for Japan. I told the press conference, and if the progress is not made, then we will go to independence. That was the first part of your question. And the question that we face right now in Okinawa, we are now facing these two great powers of Japan and the United States, and we are very small, and it's such an uphill battle. However, while we were under the administration of the U.S. government for 27 years, and the bayonet and the bulldozers were the weapons that they were using, and Mr. Price recommended that the government, U.S. government, should buy up the lands that was forcibly confiscated from the Okinawan people in the post-war period. I believe that since Okinawan people were very poor, they desperately needed money at that time, but still they joined hands together in order to fight against such pressure. So they did not sell their lands to the U.S. So most of the bases of in Okinawa are mostly the privately held lands or the publicly held lands. It's not that we will resort to some very strange method, but we cannot really predict in what way the government will try to forcibly relocate and construct a new base. So we cannot say how we will react. The question of the independence, of course, there is this kind of discussion, but it's not easy in reality. But if we are not determined to get independent even, then otherwise, and we will be easily pressured into accepting the status quo. 70% of the U.S. bases are forced upon the Okinawan people's shoulders, and this burden of hosting the U.S. bases should be shared by the entire nation. And this kind of thinking of the Japanese government is easily seen through by other countries. So once something happens, once conflict happens, Okinawa will be separated rather than Okinawa becoming independent from Japan. So this is the issue that we would like to ask you to understand fully. And the second portion of your question was, and what you expect to the mainland people? Yes. Now we have the Henoko Fund. 70% of the donors are from the mainland, and 200 million yen already surpassed. So this is a support for Henoko struggle. So the mainland people are joining hands with the Okinawan people to donate to this fund. So this is one of the examples of actions. Then the hitherto indifferent people in the mainland will get interest in this issue, and listening to the arguments by Mr. Nagatani or Mr. Abe, they will realize that this is really indeed unreasonable. The Okinawa is very small, and yet shoulders this disproportionate burden of hosting the U.S. bases in Okinawa. And if we continue this path in the future, that will really mar the dignity of Japan. And if Japan wants to have a dignified position in the international world, and the values of the democracy and freedom and human rights cannot be defended by Japan, and if Japan wants to become a leader of the world by sharing these values, if the situation goes unchanged like this, Japan will not be able to become a leader. So Japan should really understand this. if the new base cannot be built in Henoko, then that will the U.S.-Japan security system will be threatened. Because I used to be the LDP person, so I very well understand the importance of the Japan-U.S. security system. And my job is to secure the future of Okinawan people. So in such a pursuit, I would like to also seek the harmonization with Japan.
The latest U.S. National Defense Authorization Act says Henoko is a done deal. The prevailing sort of view in Washington, I think, is that this is going to go ahead. This base is going to go ahead. I think a lot of people are very interested in what exactly the purpose of your visit to the U.S. is and what you hope to achieve there.
Well, before I go, there was already a summit meeting between Japan and the United States. Mr. Obama and Prime Minister Abe had a declaration that they issued. There was also a 2+2 meeting, and there have also been different decisions that have been made by Congress. So I understand that the situation that I'm facing is very, very difficult. But still, as I mentioned earlier, in regard to the idea of building Henoko, it's not simple. There are dugongs, these marine animals. There's a beautiful coral reef, lots and lots of beautiful fish living there, and to reclaim the land, to fill it with soil and dirt. And it's also a very difficult operation. And also, you have to have the authorization of the governor of Okinawa, of the mayor of Nago, etc. The idea of bringing so much dirt and gravel and stones, you have to have 100,000 10-ton trucks going back and forth every day for a year to fill that land. I think the people in the world, if you can use the internet, if you can use your media to get this information out to the world, I think people throughout the world will understand that if they value nature, if they value these principles of democracy, etc., then they will support us and they will see what can be done. As you can see, a few days ago, we saw young people, we saw old people all coming together to try to work against this reclamation project. The opposition against the Henoko project, even though Japan Coast Guard, even though other mobile forces might be deployed, you cannot stop people from working so hard to try to protect their beautiful homes and homelands and home territories. I want to go to the United States and say to the people in the United States, it's not a simple problem at all. Please don't simply think that this is a domestic Japanese problem. It has nothing to do with us. It is a really difficult problem. It's a universal problem. It's a human problem that affects people throughout the world. It is not a domestic problem at all. From my point of view, the people in the United States, even at the summit, I feel that the leaders did not really talk about Henoko issue at all. I think they don't want to touch upon that issue at all. That was the impression that I received. However, given this background, and I understand there were probably discussions in the background, but even given this background, I want to give a very clear message in the United States. It cannot be built. This Henoko cannot be done. I am able to say this because I understand so well the feelings and wishes of the Okinawa people. The Okinawa people very much respect the United States, very much respect Japan, and they respect the U.S.-Japan Security Pact, but they want it to become something that is more reasonable and fair and equitable. This is the message that I want very much to be able to convey to the United States. I believe that without a resolution to this problem, you cannot have a peaceful economic development of Asia. We have 160 islands in Okinawa, 40 of them are inhabited. We want to make sure that this is an area of peace, a place where Japanese trade, a place where development to Asia can begin, not a place where that is going to be basically primarily a security bastion to protect the mainland. That's the message that I want to get across.
And then, John, did you have your hand up?
Hi, Onaga-san. Welcome to the FCCJ. My question is about the alleged myth of Japan independence. You mentioned in your introduction the history of Japan, and precisely if we look in the 16th century, what happened when Toyotomi Hideyoshi asked to Okinawa to support the invasion of Korea and China. The King Sho at that time, and also some pressure from Satsuma clan, have said no, Okinawa cannot provide any forces to combat China and Korea. Eventually, Hideyoshi lost his battle against China and Korea. My question is, 300 years after, do you believe that we are in the same situation where Okinawa hosting those US bases could very well survive without these US bases because of the future development of the economy that you have in Okinawa? At that time, when Hideyoshi said he didn't want to go to war, he said it's because I have good relation with China and I have a good trade relation in the whole Asian area. Do you think today your islands can survive without the US bases? How about the economy? Thank you.
At this invasion by Toyotomi Hideyoshi into Korea, and indeed, the Okinawa or Ryukyu declined the support because we didn't have weapons. So in that sense, it was impossible to participate in that war effort. However, the sugar cane and the money donation was made, I heard. You said that the alleged myth of independence of Japan, but when I referred to this alleged myth of independence 3 days ago, 27 years after the war, we were under the administration of the U.S., and at that time, the U.S. administrator said that the Okinawa self-rule is a myth. The human rights and the equality and freedom were not ensured for Okinawan people. In such a situation, we did whatever we could do, but we didn't have a good idea to improve our situation either. 73%, 8.8% of the bases are concentrated in Okinawa, and that really reflects what the Japan-U.S. Status agreement is. 45 tons of coral reef, and now they are using the 45 ton of blocks in their construction work. And they say that they'd like to survey the coral reef. But they will not allow us to survey the coral reef status. But then the Coast Guard and the defense bureaus, survey ships are all there, although they will not allow our ships to survey there. So what we are saying is this. See, Okinawa survey ships are excluded under this status agreement. It's the same thing can be said of the incidents and accidents and crimes committed by the U.S. personnel. See, this status agreement really binds our hands, and we cannot do anything. Japan will just say that we will convey your message to the U.S. So they do not have any capacity to act as the party. So that's why the U.S. is saying that the Japanese independence is a myth. So in order to regain and take back the pride and the beautiful Japan, but I really doubt it, or if they're really trying to regain Japan, I really doubt it. They should love their own people. And on that basis, they should rebuild the Japan-U.S. security system. As a leader in Japan, in Asia, Japan should rebuild itself. In terms of the economy, the basis is a major obstacle to the development of economy in Okinawa. After the post-war, it comprised 50% of GDP, and when Okinawa was reverted, it was lowered to 15%, and now it comprises only 4.9% of GDP of Okinawa. And because we have the basis, how it bars the Okinawan economic, 25 years ago, these lands around the Naha were returned. And 15 years ago, when I was the mayor of the Naha, and we reorganized the land plots, 5.2 billion yen grew to 60 billion yen, and it generated a lot of employment. Now, 18,000 people are employed, and their tax revenue was 15 times more than it was. So without the bases, you can rather make the economy prosper. So the U.S. bases are obstacle to our economic development. Because this is contributing to the Japan's security, that is why we can withstand it. But that's it. And the Japanese and the U.S. government were providing some assistance, but that's not our responsibility. And we don't have any industries, and we didn't have any industries in the post-war period, so we had to rely on the U.S. bases, but not now. The different foreign investments into hotels and so forth are coming in to these lands which were reverted from the U.S. bases. And this I would like the Japanese and the U.S. government to understand. During the Nakayama governorship, these Camp Ginza and Naha port and the other, the south of Kadena areas are now being reverted to Okinawa, as Prime Minister says. And we calculated what kind of effect it will be when all those lands were returned. And that will be 890 billion yen. That is 20 times more than when we had bases there. So the Okinawa economy will prosper and develop, but the bases are obstacle to that. So, we depend on the U.S. bases for our economy, and that is in the past 30 or 40 years ago. So it's no longer in that situation. It's an obstacle.
John Mitchell, Japan Focus. My question's connected to the last point that you made. Now, a lot of bases, when they're returned, there's contamination that's discovered on base land. What have you been doing with the Japanese government to overcome this problem? And also, what will you say to the American people when you meet them next week?
15 years ago, there was a terrible incident involving a young girl, and I went to the United States to protest. And I also went to San Francisco, and I found that I saw some base closings in the United States. There were about 100 bases that were closed, so we only saw about 3 or 4 at that time. But after the bases are cleared, what they do is they remove about a meter or 2 meters of the topsoil and remove it to some other place. And after that, they create a big tank, and they basically take groundwater and have the water there for a long time, and they don't allow people to build on that land for about 15 or 20 years. In other words, the people in the United States understand that the land where bases were are always contaminated, and they're that careful about the environment. However, when we look at the status of forces agreement so far, we see that we can't get into the bases, first of all. And yet, all sorts of contaminants come from the bases. We received an agreement last year. We had an agreement last year that they will consider our request positively about our conducting some kind of inspections, but we aren't able to see any progress on this yet. But 15, 20 years ago, already the United States within the country, they're very, very careful about how the bases land are treated afterwards. And yet, instead of the fact that in the United States, they wait 15, 20 years before people can start building on top of it, of original base land. However, with us, what they're talking about are using the base land immediately, maybe 3 or 4 years or so. But first of all, you have to make sure that the water is clean, as I said earlier. Right now, there's no discussion about such things at all. So this kind of environmental elements need to be put into the agreements that we have between Japan and the United States. That's why I sometimes say that we really are kind of stateless people. We have no rights. And even though Prime Minister Abe continues to say we're going to retrieve Japan of the past, we're going to regain Japan, I wonder if it's possible if he abandons Okinawa. We can't even inspect the land to see what it's like.
This gentleman here, and then I see Reiji and this gentleman. Yeah.
香港衛星テレビの記者の
My name is Lee from Hong Kong Satellite TV. The Japanese government sees the military development of China as a threat. That is why they need the bases in Okinawa, they say. So I would like to ask you how you see this question. Is this really a threat? How you are going to respond to this situation of the Chinese military development? With regard to this threat from China, and when I talked with Mr. Nakatani, Defense Minister, he reiterated that this is a threat and how many scrambles are done and how dangerous it is, and that is why the self-defense forces should be deployed in Miyakojima and Ishigaki and so forth. And in consideration of the Japanese security, this should be taken into consideration, he asked me. So I replied that then in the Cold War situation where Japan was supposedly confronting the Soviet Union, then was that also a threat? And the so-called threat from China is more threat than in the Cold War era, and also now they will have an agreement on, and they will also include the Eastern regions in their efforts, and they would use the Okinawan bases. So the value of the Okinawa was supposedly against the threat from the Soviet Union, but now it has shifted to China, and then now going to further into the Middle East. So for the peace of the United States and other countries, we should withstand this situation forever. And they say that the bases are necessary in the Okinawa, but Joseph Nye and Mike Mochizuki in the United States already 3 years ago was very active in discussing that the Chinese missiles have been very sophisticated right now. The nuclear submarine of the U.S. deploys about 20 nuclear warheads, which is equivalent to about 5,000 times of the power of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bomb. So, and this missiles equivalent to the power 500 times more of the Hiroshima and Okinawa. And if one of these missiles hit Okinawa, then not just the Okinawan people, but also the U.S. personnel will also be destroyed. So that is why Mr. Joseph Nye and Mr. Mike Mochizuki discussed that the bases should be relocated outside of Okinawa. However, they are not so active right now, but they are still discussing that whether the reinforcement of the bases in Okinawa can really cope with the threat from the Chinese, and I doubt it. And the Ospreys are the transport helicopters. It's not for the attacks purposes. And in just one prefecture, all the burdens of defending the country, Japan, is concentrated. I'm a conservative politician in Okinawa. In order to defend the future generations, I can accept that if all other Japanese prefectures will equally share the burden of hosting the U.S. bases. However, it's not so.
Thank you, Randy, and then this gentleman here.
I'm Japan Times. I have two questions. In regard to the relocation of the Futenma Air Force Base, I've been watching this theme for about 20 years, but the last 4 or 5 years, things have changed. I think the Okinawa people seem to feel that they're being discriminated against. I'm not going to say it's racial discrimination, but it seems that they feel stronger and stronger than ever before that there is a discrimination against the Okinawa people. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Do you think that there was something? What is the biggest thing, the biggest factor that changed the idea of the awareness of the Okinawa people that they're being discriminated against by the mainlands? And in regard to the economy, I think there are new trends afoot. But if we saw something like Chatancho, an area where there's an American village, in 1998 it was opened. But we're seeing that, however, that retail sales have not gone up overall in Okinawa. It's a zero-sum game just in Okinawa. What I'm saying is that there's a great deal of debate about Okinawa, but when we talk about this zero-sum game aspect in Okinawa for the economy, what do you think should be done? What do you think about my observations? In regard to the last few years, the idea of being feeling discriminated against in Okinawa, I think about 8 years ago, there was a textbook certification process that took place. I think at that time, Okinawa, the idea that we were all very happy to become part of Japan during the war, and we fought with the Japanese people. But however, it was very much a terrible situation during the end of the last war, because it was a battlefield on the ground, which meant that people, had to run into caves, and the people of Okinawa were treated terribly. There were bombs thrown into the caves. There were people that were forced to commit suicide. However, in the textbook revision process 8 years ago, there was an effort by the national government that tried to erase these terrible stories of the past that all of us in Okinawa had heard from our grandfathers and our grandmothers. And so 100,000 people came together in Okinawa. Didn't matter what part of the political spectrum you belonged to, whether you were conservative or reformist, whatever, we all came together and said, we cannot change history in that way. You cannot erase our history. The fact that we made such tremendous sacrifices for the rest of Japan. In spite of that, this is how we are treated. In other words, that there's an effort to try to change the history textbooks in this way. It made the people of Okinawa incredibly sad and angry. And we decided that we had to figure out exactly what we as Okinawans were, what kind of history and tradition we had. How are we going to basically survive into the future? We're not just going to be part of Japan. We're somehow a little bit different, but in other words, we began to become more aware of our own human rights. We became more aware of our own heritage. And at the same time, we saw that the rest of Asia was growing as well. And we began to see that we would like not to necessarily be dependent of Japan. Although we were proud to be part of Japan, we didn't want to be dependent on Japan. We wanted to become more autonomous. We wanted to have the same autonomy as other regional parts of Japan. We wanted to be part of this greater growth that we were seeing in Asia. And that's why, in regard to the U.S. bases, I don't want to use such words, but the idea of someone saying that we're going to proceed as planned, regardless of what the Okinawa people believe. There are some people in the government that said such things. I hate such words. Those words are very, very tragic for Okinawa people to hear. The GDP, as I said earlier, is growing steadily, and our unemployment rate was 2 or 3 times as bad as before. Now it's 6% in the mainland. Well, basically, if it's we're about 1.5% worse than in the mainland. If it's 4% in the mainland, then we're about 66% in terms of unemployment. But still, our economy is growing. We're full of energy. There's a lot of direct investment from abroad that is directed our way. I went to Taipei recently and spoke with the people at their Keidanren, their business federation, and I was told that many companies really want to invest in Okinawa, and so please try to remove a lot of the regulatory barriers that exist so that we can do more investment, because there's so much that we're interested in terms of investment in Okinawa. This kind of positive approach I've seen from other countries of the world as well. But so in many, many different economic financial figures, if you look at them, you see that we have great potential.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes on the clock. 10分ぐらい延長お願いできますか、Onaga先生。ですか。So we have this gentleman here, and then I see this gentleman and this lady. You wanted to ask a question, is that right? So if we get them all in, can you keep your questions as short as you can, and only one question, please? Thank you.
I'm from Akahata Journal. Regarding Ospreys, despite your protest yesterday, the northern part of the Okinawa island, we could observe the Osprey flying. And another point in the petition that you proposed, the withdrawal of the deployment of the Ospreys, are you going to talk about that in the United States? And the deployment to Yokota base of the Ospreys is also a major issue right now. So many accidents have happened with Ospreys, whether Okinawa or elsewhere in Japan. Deployment of such aircrafts, once an accident happens, that is a major risk posed to the Japan-US security system. So it's not an issue just limited to Okinawa, but this question of the deployment of Ospreys in other parts of Japan too, from the viewpoint, your viewpoint of this importance of Japan-US security system, what do you think of the issue? Regarding the deployment of Ospreys, the starting point was also related with the status of forces agreement. In the Japan-US Consultative Committee, there is a rule of operation of the Ospreys. In the urban areas, they will not fly, and after 10 p.m. they will not fly according to these rules. But what it says in these rules after that, as I said, of this, 2025 and 2028 thereafter, and it's the same thing here, to the extent possible. After 10 p.m. and on the urban districts, they will not fly to the extent possible. In the first 1 year, we conducted a survey, and there were 300 flights observed. And they say, the U.S. said that they will try to adhere to the rules as much as possible. But this is very clear from the eyes of the Okinawan people, but not to the eyes of the mainland people. This U.S.-Japan status of forces agreement, and also take the issue of the Yokota base of the Philippines and the Myanmar. Those smaller countries have a firmer determination not to allow the deployment of those Ospreys, and so they are more independent in their mentality. However, Japan is the only country that doesn't have that through the post-war economic development period. So they prospered together with the United States. That was good. However, in reality, these kind of problems with the Ospreys are also the problems to be shared by the mainland Japan. So the Osprey's deployment is really something that we should be against. And the deployment to the Yokota base is said to be because of the consideration to the Okinawan people's burden. And so 500 personnel with them. So although ideally they would like to deploy them in Okinawa, but because of this situation, deploying more Ospreys in Okinawa will only entrench the opposition of the Okinawa people, and that is why they are placing them in the Yokota for now. That is my view. But we cannot oppose the deployment of the Ospreys in the Yokota base. So the Japan-U.S. alliance should be a dignified thing that Japanese people can be proud of. The human dignity and how humans should live. When we consider those, if we really want to regain Japan, if we have to really see whether we have been satisfactorily being able to regain Japan when we consider this issue of Osprey.
This gentleman here, and then we'll for a second.
ニコニコ動画の七尾と申します。
I'm from Nico Nico Doga. Nanao. The governor mentioned a few moments ago that according to different media polls, there's pretty more people opposed to Henoko than in favor of Henoko. There's at least a 10% difference, 10-point difference. And certainly it's undeniable that more people in the mainland are aware of this issue. But on the other hand, in regard to this problem, how much aware of this problem are the U.S. people? I don't know. I'm Japanese. I don't know. So before you go to the United States, in regard to, can you tell us a little bit before your visit to the United States, what do you think about this problem of how aware of this problem the American people are? Well, we also have our Okinawa local paper send reporters to the United States, Washington, et cetera, to try to do some research. And we've heard many comments from many different kinds of people. And for the sort of elite of the United States, the people who are very much, for example, Mr. Campbell, Mr. Michael Green, these people who understand these issues and are sort of working on a very high level in government. But for the average American person, the United States is a huge presence in the world, and they aren't even interested that much in Japan, and much less in a part of Japan, which is Okinawa. They're not simply aware of it. After all, there are so many things that are happening throughout the world, and the United States is also involved in battles throughout the world. There are other things that are distracting them from our voices. We must understand this and accept this. But still, the U.S.-Japan Alliance Security Pact is very, very important to the United States. And this idea of creating a Henoko idea, whether it was a Japan idea, a U.S. idea, or both countries' idea. But the point that I want to get across to the people that I meet there is that it's not possible to be realized. It's not something that you're going to be able to build, that we're going to be able to build. It's just not going to be realizable because the people of Okinawa will not allow it. And certainly, again, I know that we have to try to somehow make an appeal to the U.S. people, to the American people. I understand that. And that's, of course, related to the mass media, whether we can be successful during this current upcoming visit. In regard to our power, we are very limited in terms of our abilities and might, power, so we might not be able to get our message across to all of the American people, but at least to some key people in the United States. I think we can make an appeal to please ask them to please change the U.S.-Japan security system or alliance or pact into something that is more dignified, that gives all people human dignity, something that can be respected throughout the people of Asia. In the way it is right now, things just will not proceed. That Henoko base will not be built, is what I want to convey. This is a problem that we need to work on together, and then together we can also try to work in a positive way for the development of Asia, and Okinawa can contribute in many ways in that way. I think, in other words, I don't want to take just a negative message, but also add a positive message as well.
Thank you for your presence. My name is Lee from Hong Kong TV. The governor went to China and met with the Chinese leadership, and I'd like to hear your comments. And also, there is this tension between Japan and the China regarding the Senkaku Islands. So, including this Senkaku issue, what do you see the relationship between China, and how do you see the future of this issue? I met the Prime Minister Lee when I visited China. Although I have been speaking mainly about the U.S. bases recently, but an Asia Economic Sphere initiative is something that we discussed, logistic bases or the international resort facilities and others. How can we make Okinawa as one of the hubs of Asian economy? So with that purpose in mind, I visited Beijing, and after that, 2 or 3 days later, I also visited Taiwan. And the reason I went to Beijing is for the Asia Strategic Spheres Initiative, and Mr. Kono Yohei was there. And Mr. Kono highly regarded our efforts that we repeatedly attended those various forums, and that is why I attended this Asia Economic Initiative. And just 1 day before the forum, I suddenly learned that I was able to meet with Prime Minister Lee, and then Mr. Kono then said that these trade issues with regard to Okinawa and so forth. And Mr. Kono said that I will try to make time so that you can talk with Mr. Lee. So I talked with Mr. Lee and asked that we would like to have a direct chartered flight between Beijing and the Okinawa. And just immediately after that, we received the authorization for that, and we had the word of encouragement from him. So I think that he showed understanding to our requests and issues. So the difficult issues were talked about by Mr. Kono with the Chinese counterparts. But in particular, I have been having exchanges with the Fuzu city as part of this Asia Strategic and Economic Initiative. And the other question was, what was that? Yeah, regarding Senkaku Islands. We want to be the buffer of zone of peace, I said. I talked about the bases and the economy. 13 years ago, when there was this 9/11 terrorist attacks into the buildings in New York, and at that time, we thought that that was something that happened in faraway places. However, a few days later, because we host the U.S. bases, in most of the student trips were canceled, and we could only revive the level of the tourists coming to Okinawa only 2 or 3 years later. So it had a huge impact. The same thing can be said of the Senkaku Islands. Although I do think that the Senkaku Islands belong to Japan, however, should something happen, skirmishes happen between the two countries, now the 1 million people is coming to Ishigaki Island, and when there is some conflict occurring between the two nations, these 1 million people will be reduced to 100,000 people. So we do not want any conflict to occur in those islands. So peace is very important, most important, and we should have peace in mind as the purpose of our responses to these issues. And if we So we have to be very careful in approaching this issue. So the peace should be maintained. Whatever happens, peace is most important in trying to pursue the solution. That is the stance of the Okinawan prefecture.
Sorry, Daniel, we're out of time. I'd like to thank the governor for coming along today and talking with such flair and honesty, and for enduring his grilling here. And we hope that it actually took us 6 months to get him here, so we hope that he will come back sooner next time and take more questions. And also, if he'll wear that great Okinawa shirt. If only the whole Japanese government would kit themselves out in Okinawa shirts, it'd be great. Please show your appreciation to the governor for turning up today. Can I ask you to remain seated until he has left the building, just like Elvis Presley? Thank you.